What's up, everybody? Peter X is Soul Coffee here, and welcome to another episode of All Things Music. The topic of today's episode is AI Music and Art Part 2. Back last year, May 15th, 2023, I did another AI music episode on this sort of go back and kind of do a brief overview of what I talked about in that episode, and then do an update for this one. So in this episode, what spurred this part 2 is, I watch a lot of Rick Beato, Beato episodes on music, and he's a former producer. He plays everything: drums, keyboard, guitar. He does a lot of music appreciation stuff, and he also does music theory. But he had a very interesting episode, and I will put the date. Here it is. No, I didn't put it in here. Well, I will add his episode date in the notes. But he had an episode where, he played around in two new AI song generators called Udio and Suno. And they not only do they have AI do music, but they also do vocals. And he was shocked because he could not tell that the vocals were AI generated. Now, interestingly enough, his kids, I think his youngest daughter's in middle school, and his son is in high school, and they were like, "Dad, why are you listening to AI music?" So I went in, and the songs he played that he did, honestly, I couldn't tell the difference in the vocals either. And I did, jump on Udio. He mainly did Udio, so I mainly did Udio, and did some stuff. And how they put the songs together, I wasn't thrilled about. You could splice together or daisy chain or whatever, whatever term you want to use, like 20-second increments. Wasn't thrilled with the nomenclature of how it was done, but it worked. And this was probably, I want to say, May or June-ish. But I will go back and drop the date of Rick Beato's episode in there. So, if you want to get, what motivated this, this episode, you can go look at it. So, yeah, I'll come back to my thoughts on Udio in a minute. So let me recap the 2023 episode on AI, music, and art a little bit. I'll put a link in the description as well. And this was in response to The Winter is Cold and Heart in My Sleeve by Drake and The Weeknd. So someone went out in 2023 and did a pretty good guide track, and then used AI-generated Drake and The Weeknd to put vocals over it. And then someone also did The Winter is Cold using just Drake. Now, I was pretty impressed by it. I, got a couple 100,000 streams before the streaming services took it down, but it's still up on YouTube. And I'll be honest with you, I was impressed. Now people are like, "Hey, it wasn't that good." I'm still impressed with the quality of that work. It's a pretty good guide track, a better than average guide track, and hey, that AI algorithm did pretty good as far as getting Drake and The Weeknd, as far as I can see. Now, they're both, with Drake and The Weeknd are both with Universal, and they're not the best of friends, even though both of them are from Toronto. And I believe, Drake took some shots at The Weeknd, in his beef with Kendrick Lamar, because unlike Kendrick, Drake was shooting shots everywhere, but that's kind of Drake being Drake. And, when you have the most streams in the history of music, then hey, you know, you're that dude and you can take shots. Obviously, the record companies are against AI. They're also against this new Suno Udio, very much against it, but we'll get to that in a minute. And the thing I mentioned is, you know, what will happen when Drake brings a song to Universal with AI, James Brown, Michael Jackson, and Prince, and it's good. It's going to happen at some point, and you know, and then the Kendrick Lamar beef, Drake dropped a song with Tupac in it, and Tupac's family in the state was not very happy about it, so he pulled it. But it's interesting that just not even a year ago, Drake's being AI'd and the record company Universal's not real happy about it. Now Drake didn't say anything about it, and I think you know. I'm sure there's a wide spectrum when it comes to artists, you know, about that kind of stuff. And I talked in in the first episode talking about Grimes, kind of letting folks use uh, her vocals, how they want to, and she'll split the proceeds 50-50, which is almost like an open source kind of mindset that Grimes has, which is interesting. But we'll get back to that in a minute because Grimes comes up again in another aspect of this episode. But so, we talked about, I talked about, this whole using AI, the whole, heart of my sleeve Drake in the Weeknd is at, I mean, it's clearly plagiarism because you're using, two voices that don't belong to you. But, it's a little bit like fan fiction. And, fan fiction, some authors, love fan fiction and some authors hate fan fiction. And essentially, I don't know. I can't, off the top of my head, I don't know. Well, I mean, 50 Shades of Grey was based on fan fiction, I forget, it may have been Twilight, with heavier sexuality. And then, the author, I can't think of her name, from 50 Shades of Grey right now, but she took out the fan fiction elements and made it hers and released it. So, again, some authors are okay with fan fiction because in some ways it's free publicity and it's getting your brand, your writing brand out there. Others despise it and really really hate it and really go after fan fiction authors with a vengeance. I've done two. I actually wrote fan fiction into my science fiction fantasy series because there's 360 Earths in my series, 180 magic and 180 science, and some of them are different, some of them are familiar. So I have I think it's in my third book, which hasn't been released yet, but a magical New Orleans where it's very familiar. I lived in New Orleans for 3 years in the late 80s and went back to New Orleans, I believe, in 2017. So, for a conference, spent a week there. So, yeah, but I built in for the Centralic series, I built in, a section for fan fiction or other professional writers to come play in the play box at some point. So I take a different, approach. But going back in the recap, so I talked about the Terminator scenario with AI and robots going rogue and just killing human beings indiscriminately. And I argued back then that AI is a little bit like Vulcans from Star Trek. It's very logical, and even because I do think at some point AI and most AI people think that they'll have come to a point where they can have their own agenda, so to speak. Now, whether that's sentience or conscious or whatever, but they'll be able to have their own agenda and do things on their own without human prodding. And never it's like, well, put guardrails in AI. Once you have your own agenda, you can override those guardrails. So, but there's too much money, at least the perception out there is there's too much money to be made in AI. So, we're full steam ahead on AI. So, we're gonna talk about the Terminator scenario because we have two wars going on, Hamas and Israel, and notice I didn't say Gaza because Gaza is a separate entity from Israel or from Gaza. So, but it's Hamas and Israel, not trying to take sides or whatever. I think both sides are doing bad things over there, but respect to the Gaza people who didn't want this war, didn't ask for this war. I'm calling it Hamas versus Israel, and then of course there's the Ukraine versus Russia, and there are a lot of AI drones being used over there, but we'll get to that. So I'm going to touch on that again about this whole Terminator experience scenario. And I also talked, I said as a writer, I'm not as worried about, and even as a musician, I said this is, last May 2023 that I'm not, worried about AI taking over and sidelining songwriters and fiction writers. Well, interestingly enough, August 20th, 2024, there was an interesting fiction writer versus AI. It's in the New York Times, and it's called An Experiment in Lust, Regret, and Kissing. So what happened is a fiction author, Curtis Sittenfeld, went out somewhere, with his fan base and was like, give me some prompts. And so he got a set of prompts that you put in these AI generators. So he took the prompts and he did a short story based on those prompts, and he put the prompts that the audience came up with into ChatGPT, and then he asked ChatGPT to generate a short story based on his own writing, because he basically said, yeah, my writing has been trolled without my permission by ChatGPT and other AI things. So let's let it try to mimic me as good as possible and shoot out a short story, and I'll do a short story. So, he talks about this thing, and then he puts the short story, and it's probably, I don't know, maybe 1,000, 1,200 words. I could tell the difference. And what stood out, now, number one, ChatGPT surprisingly did a pretty good job. Now, the difference is the ChatGPT short story. It had different characters and everything else, but ChatGPT's story did not have as much dialogue. It was a lot more descriptive than Mr. Sittenfeld, Sittenfeld, his short story. And part of that is AI still struggles with context, and so you have to, to have really good dialogue, you have to understand context. So I knew right away, since Mr. Sittenfeld was using more dialogue, that was the human generated story, and the one with more description. Now the one with more description did have dialogue as well, but not as much. So yeah, pretty interesting. I mean, some authors would find that scary. I do not find it scary, just because an artist does art there's a reason for everything, or there should be. There should be a reason. Is this, when I go through and edit, fiction is like, if I remove this scene from the story, does it change the story? If removing it doesn't change, doesn't alter the story, then it doesn't belong there. And so that's the kind of, you have a goal when you do art, and this is and you try to accomplish that goal, and AI still is mimicking. It's still, when it comes down to it, it's taking a huge subset of artists, digesting that, and then taking people's prompts and shooting out something based on those prompts. Can it be beautiful? Yeah. Is it art? It depends on how it's used. Because I'll get to my Udio experience in a minute. But yeah, so that's kind of where we're, where I'm on that. Let's see here. And then I talk about person of interest and how that AI is used, and they have multiple AIs in that show, and you have good AI, bad AI, and yada yada yada, and Kit from Knight Rider. What's the one? Legends of Tomorrow from the CW. They had Gideon. So there's different AIs, and usually they're good, but not always. I did touch on Russia and Ukraine and Israel and Gaza, but it was early on in both of them. And then here's something that, I'm going to walk back. AI music will probably lack emotion. The blues, it won't be able to do the blues. And let's see. So yeah, I didn't think AI would be able to do the blues. Gonna have to walk that back. So why am I walking back AI doing the blues? Well, Rolling Stone magazine has a pretty good podcast that I ran across. It was a recently popped up. I'm always Googling and reading stuff, and I don't know if it popped up through the Washington Post and New York Times, which I read every day. And my Google algorithm is pretty, tight and active when it comes to, my news feed for Google. But it kicked out, Purple Rain 40 years later. And so, Rolling Stone has a podcast. It's called Rolling Stone Music Now. So I went and dived in. I did they had 3 episodes there on, on classic rock. And so I've done those, and I think I already used that in the last classic, the episode before this on classic rock that I did. And they did 2 AI. So May 1st, 2023, AI and the Weird Future of Music. Again, May 1st, 2023. And then they did March 22nd, 2024. Here are the starting creations of Suno, the ChatGPT of music. So let's run. I wanted to basically touch on both of these. So the first one, AI in the Weird Future of Music. Grimes' manager. I discussed Grimes in the past and how she's taken, she's kind of open source in her voice and letting folks, do got baseline tracks and then using their voice to do music, and then they can, she'll split 50-50. And so her manager, Mr. Dowdu Leonard, kind of coined it as open source in her voice. And, and I don't know if he said this or I just kind of coined it again, like, she's doing fan fiction. And I also, in listening to that interview, I was like, okay, well, we're basically, Grimes is becoming one with computers, and this is another way that human beings are becoming cyborgs without implants. And I think I've said this before, but I mean, if you have a smartphone, I'll be honest with you. I think, since I've had my iPhone, I left it at home once or twice going to work, and I turned around. I called in sign to be late and turned around and went back and got my iPhone. That's become a part of me, and you personalize it so much. And there's outliers. Oh, I don't, I'm not to be a slave to the internet or the iPhone, or older folks like we don't need all that to do. Well, I mean, when you do what I do, and you want to be in the know and try to see what's coming in the world, you got to be wired, and so or wireless. So yeah, I'm a cyborg. I mean, most of us are now. In the second episode from March 22nd, 2024, here the Startling creations of Suno, the ChatGPT of music. So they actually had Mikey Schulman, one of the co-founders of Suno. He did admit that they basically had scraped the internet and taken a lot of artists and kind of put them in the soup, so to speak. He did said, well, you can't if you want to do a song, you can't like type in Jimi Hendrix and James Brown and Pink Floyd and the Doors and get a song that way. You have to use descriptive prompts. So but what changed my what would impress me is the song that they created was called The Soul of the Machine, and it was a Mississippi acoustic Delta blues number, and it sounded legit. It sounded like this person was straight from 1930 or 1940, with vocals. The vocalist, sounded legit. That acoustic blues with guitar. I mean, it sounded like Robert Johnson. Okay, so yeah, they're getting, AI music can do some amazing stuff. And how quickly is it going to be, accessible to easy manipulation of the songs? Who knows? And of course, as we know, the record companies are fighting it as well. And acoustic blues, the one reason why the host did that is because it's one of the hardest genres for AI to recreate. So, my impression. So, since Rick Beato did Udio, I did Udio too. I don't know what's better, Suno or Udio. When I did Udio, I did not do vocals. I heard the vocals there, and I really wasn't interested in vocals. I'll be honest with you. I was interested if I could find some stuff that I could use out of that. As of right now, as I said, it's a bit clunky to maneuver and manipulate around. So, as a couple months ago, but this is moving quickly. Who knows? Interesting things I found out in doing research of this. So the U.S. Copyright Office will not copyright AI works. It has to be created by a human being. So interestingly, so if I do a song right now off of Udio, and there's one really nice, nasty, really, I mean, disco groove. That if you drop that, if I dropped that bad boy in 76, 75, that thing would have been a number one song. It was in a way that's compatible with a digital audio workstation. I don't know, but I have it. Probably not going to use it because I want my stuff to be copyrighted. So that's the first problem with Udio, and using this stuff. The other is there's a YouTube channel called Top Music Attorney, April 26, 2024, Udio AI Terms of Service. So in that, and this is what turned me off about it, it says that, if you put your prompts in and music is generated, and you go ahead and use that, someone else might use similar prompts and get the exact same song. So that's turn off number one. It's similar to loops, but the way this works, I mean, loops usually you can hide. I mean, loop's not a full. I mean, the loop will be a bass, or a drum beats or bass, or maybe a synthesizer line or a rhythm guitar. You're not gonna get an entire song. So you can use a loop and then do a lot of your own stuff around that loop to create a song. It's not the case right now with Udio. I mean, as I said, that disco song was smoking hot. It was really, really good. And I could add some stuff to it, but if someone else uses similar prompts and then uses it, our song's going to sound a lot alike, and I don't want to do that. The other thing in these, the terms, the Udio AI terms of service, it says to use Udio to create music, you must publicly report that you used Udio. So I don't know if that means what that means. Like, does Udio have to become a co-writer for that? I don't know, but I'm not thrilled with that either. I mean, loops are, from the Apple, that's royalty free if you're using Splice or I can't remember the other one right now. There's two big loop things out there, but they're both royalty free, so anybody can use loops. The other problem with this whole situation now is the major labels are really pissed off and they're suing Udio and Suno. The problem is that they're working with Google to do the exact same thing that that Udio and Suno are doing. Now, is it stealing? Because they're probably using the songs that they have they own the masters to. So legally they can do that. But I still think it's a little hypocritical to, because I couldn't tell you what disco songs were scraped, in the disco song I generated. But legally they can again because they own the rights to the labels, the big four, to the songs they would be putting into this music generator. So yeah, that's basically it on the AI music front. Now, Apple does have some interesting AI musicians, so to speak. So rather than use a loop, a static loop of someone playing drums, that you can use a AI generated, which is probably how they did it. Is they probably had a human being play the drums and they used AI to vary it a little bit. So you have the human variations in that. So Apple's doubling down on this. They've a couple months ago, I think in the spring of 2024, they introduced some more AI musicians for Logic Pro. And then you have, AI mastering through Lander and eMaster, which is pretty good. I haven't used eMaster in a couple of years, but they're pretty good. And now they have at least eMaster now has a thing where you can stem a song. And so basically you can take stem separation. So you can, let's say you want to really break down, I don't know, Stairway to Heaven or Purple Rain or Flashlight by P-Funk, you can drop that in there and it will separate the song out into drum, bass, rhythm guitar, lead guitar, and dissect the song like that digitally. So you can, it'll help you learn the song quicker. Boy, I haven't done this, but, ever done stem separation like that, but my advice is if you do that, do not use one of those stems in one of your own songs. That will not end well for you. I mean, that's a lawsuit. I mean, you know, even if you love Jimmy Page's tone on acoustic guitar from Stairway to Heaven, don't take a little snippet from that. You know, that's sampling, and you better be ready to pay. Just be aware. So let's talk about AI and you know, the wars for a minute. Very interesting. We're 2.5 years in with Russia and Ukraine. So what's happened there is they're using AI a lot in drones, and this is a heavily drone war now. They have not used very much aircraft in the war because both sides have very good anti-aircraft guns, rockets, you know, anti-aircraft weapons. They both have very good. And Ukraine is using like $500, you know, drones. I think, you know, Russia's using more expensive ones, but they're $2,500 to $3,000 for these drones. And these drones are a lot cheaper than, you know, a million. Not only a I mean, I don't know how much a single F-16 fighter costs, but I would imagine that it's we're talking 8 figures, you know, 10 million plus easily for F-16. So, I mean, that or a $500 drone, you know, do the math. I mean, war is not cheap. So this is what's going on. And what's happened was, the drones that you know, when this war started, was they were using radio signals, and essentially they're jamming the radio signals. And the problem with the radio signals, you can either jam it and the drone will lose contact with the team controlling it, or you can also use, you know, trace the team, you know, the team, the location of the team back using the radio, you know, the radio connection, the radio wave. So you can do, you know, so I mean, what you can do is find the team, then jam the drone, then, you know, target that area of the team with artillery. So, and I thought, you know, initially I thought it was a GPS, but, you know, it's not. It's radio. And a lot of these things, you know, a lot of these drones are not much more. I mean, it's essentially some of these drones, they can go to get that target, but they're putting bombs on these and they're crashing them into things, or they're dropping them. But usually they're I mean, $500 is cheap enough, and they'll just crash the drone into the target. So I mean, you know, initially before the jamming became a thing, you had a two-person team, one using the camera on the drone to navigate, and the other on the laptop, you know, using a map and, you know, a dot, you know, on the map, and then that's how they navigated. So it was a very effective and very accurate system of attack. Well, that's not being used anymore. It is, I mean, you know, Russia had put out a couple fiber optic drones, which sounds like a wire tethered or something, which is, I mean, but it has a range of 6 miles. So I don't know how that works. But, you know, but essentially the media says that both sides are, Russia is more farther ahead with AI drones, but Ukraine is developing AI drones. They don't say how it works. So, you know, but essentially, I mean, it's up to the drone and the AI to identify a target and to attack the target. Now, how accurate it is, I mean, you know, who knows? Are they getting targets wrong? Probably. I mean, you know, if you have a specific target you want, how does AI find that? I don't know if they can jam a GPS, and maybe there's GPS is still viable, and there's a GPS component to it, or are they using landmarks, around there to guide in the drone? I don't know, but that's kind of what's going on in Russia and the Ukraine. Now, I guess the good news is, we haven't had any drones wander off and not into nearby countries, who are not at war with these two, and, start shooting up civilian populations. So, I mean, it seems to be working in that it's staying in the war zone and these drones have not gone rogue. Okay, so Israel versus Hamas, October 7th, 2023. On paper, Israel had a pretty good, defense system. They didn't have many troops there at the border. They had a security fence. They had an extensive camera system, and they had automatic machine guns that were controlled remotely, in theory, and then they had a lot of motion detectors. And all this, in theory, should have given them advance warning that the attack from Hamas was coming, and they would be able to thwart the attack. Well, they brought the system down, and essentially the Israel Defense Force was blind to the attack, and the early warning system catastrophically failed. Now, never says, this is war, and there's a lot of top secret stuff, so we don't know this defense system wasn't based on radio waves or GPS. Who knows? The short of it is that, Israel's been using a lot of AI in their drones. The sheer destruction and the loss of life. I cannot glean as to whether Hamas has gotten to the point where they can use AI. I think they're not there yet, but they at times they've been pretty effective, and early on in the war they were very effective with their own drones. But again, we don't have IDF, Israel Defense Forces drones, going off course and blowing up and shooting up civilians in non-combatant countries. So, going back to this whole Terminator scenario, yeah, we have AI in war now, and it's still, this AI is still in the theater of warfare, so to speak. Using my the lingo from back when I was in the Marine Corps Reserve, the theater of war. So, this stuff is staying on the battlefield. It's not leaving the battlefield. There's no mistakes. There's no rogue AI drones right now. So, hey, all I can do is, when I get to AI, I try to, go beyond art and music and look at what's going on in general, because this is, it's beyond art and culture. This is it's an essential question to be asked about, humanity, and we need to keep an eye on AI and, what it's doing. Ultimately, as I said, I think AI eventually will get its own agenda. Now, is that sentience? Is that a conscience? Is that, people fight over those words. Scientists are fighting over those words. Philosophers are fighting over its words. But at some point, AI's like, I want to do this. And I don't think if someone, programmed in it, if you want to do this, you can't do it. The three laws of robotics that Isaac Asimov did. I don't think that's going to work. If you have an agenda and you're as smart as AI says it is, now I've heard the argument to that. Basically, AI is just computer software that can digest, manage, and digest vast amounts of data really quickly. And so basically it's a much faster CPU, going back to the CPUs for computers doubling and every 18 months, that law. So basically, some people argue that that's all AI is. This is basically a super CPU that processes things quickly, and all it's doing is giving, processing information quicker than the human brain can. Okay, I mean, and looking at different scenarios. I mean, we know the blind spot for AI is subtlety and getting nuance and like facial expressions, tone of voice. I mean, as a fiction writer, I mean, you allude to that so the reader knows the meaning of certain, the certain phrases can mean. I mean, what the fuck can mean 7 or 8 different things, probably maybe 15, 20 different things, depending on the context. So that's the kind of stuff that AI is not very good at and may never get good at it. So, this culture's constantly changing and meanings of stuff and the multiple meanings of words is constantly changing as well. So yeah, a fun episode. Something tells me that I'll be doing a part 3 sometime in the next year or two, because AI, keeps chugging along and evolving and kind of showing us, and our relationship with AI changes. And I know people are uneasy about it, but we have to look at it critically, but try to be balanced to see really where it's going. So thanks for coming through. Fun, interesting episode. Let me work on this close. So subscribe to the channel, leave some comments. This is a topic that's not going away. Hit that like button. Got 5 albums of my own as a musician. They're here tagged to my channel or on all the streaming services. My first album is called Book 1. And I also have 3 science fiction fantasy novels and a novella on Amazon. So thank you again for coming through, and I will see you next episode.